Hello and welcome to Pagabo Live, our initiative designed to promote knowledge in the public sector. My name's Tom, and over the next hour, we'll be talking about the power of social value as a means of building place with a panel of industry experts. If you could introduce yourselves now, guys, starting with you, Danielle.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Doherty. I'm the head of social value for VINCI Building UK. I've been working in the construction sector for 19 years, 10 years in social value sector.
Brilliant. Good to have you on, Danielle. Next up is Hayley.
Hello, everybody. My name's Hayley Cowell. I am the social value lead for Lindum Group. We're a regional contractor working across the East Midlands, predominantly from our offices in Lincoln, Peterborough, and York. I've been with Lindum for 10 years now, working in construction, progressed from the bids team now into social value for the past sort of 2 or 3 years.
Excellent. Good to have you on, Hayley. And last but by no means least, we have Ethan.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan Campbell, Principal Economist for Loop. I've been with Loop now for 4 years. So I primarily work on the methodology and the metrics that sit behind our social value system and also help organizations with their social value strategy.
Brilliant. Well, we'll get on to the nuances around measuring social value and the importance of that later on in today's discussion. So today's event is, as always, a panel discussion. So we're going to be talking about the meaning of place and where social value fits into that, the tensions in strategic delivery, and how innovation and collaboration is managed within those tensions. We'd also love it if you as the audience could get involved as well. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you like using the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Sometimes, depending on what platform you're using Zoom on, it may be hidden behind the three more buttons. So make sure you're clicking on there to ensure that you're getting your opportunity to ask questions. We'll put those to the panel at the end of today's webinar. We'll be also running our usual polls during today's session to gauge everyone's level of understanding of the topics we're discussing, and no pressure on our panelists, but it is on a scale of 1 to 4 that we do check at the start and end. So hopefully you'll help deliver some knowledge today. And that is in fact our first poll. So if you could bring that poll up now, please, just asking how confident you are in designing and delivering place-based social value on your projects. And hopefully we'll get a good response from our audience and get a bit of an idea of where their confidence level is. So 1, being not very confident, 4, being very confident. So if we could close that poll now, please, after 30 seconds. Excellent. So good participation level in the first instance, but looking at that, we've got just 8% of those that responded say that they are very confident in designing and delivering place-based social value on your projects, with more than half in that lower section of 1s and 2s. So certainly an opportunity for us to build some public sector knowledge throughout today's webinar. We'll bring up then the first question, and we'll go to all of you on this, but we'll start with you, Danielle. What's the first thing you look for when trying to understand the place that you're going to be working in relation to social value?
Thanks, Tom. So this process usually starts at a tender stage, or if we know we've got a tender coming in and we know a bit more about the project, we'll start that research a little bit before. But the first thing that I go to is the index of multiple deprivation. So looking about what the local area needs and what the community needs. And then we'll also approach local services, so your local employment services, your local community, any VCSC groups that understand what the community's voice is. We will approach them and ask them what the community needs. So then our offer is all based around what the community needs, because we've done that research in the first place. So yeah, community needs, first place to look for, and Google is the best place for me to start.
Always start with a good old Google. Now, Hayley, we'll go to you also on this question. Now, I grew up in Lincolnshire, so I'm used to seeing Lindum's red and yellow vans. So
you can't miss our red and yellow vans
flying around the county.
Yeah, very similar to Danielle. So we always tend to look at the local community and the sort of economic landscape as well. So we're looking the people, the organisations and the networks that sort of make that area unique to what it is. So it's the what are the skills of the workforce, the community priorities, social needs, working with community groups, the supply chain, what's the business ecosystem look like? And again, there's lots of various platforms that we do to sort of enable them conversations. So quite often, particularly if we're working for a public sector client, most public sector authorities tend to have a business economy department. So they're always great to connect with, and they can pass on information about relevant job centres and what recruitment needs are. And also as well, just staying close to the client as well and understanding them and understanding their priorities as well. So particularly with our repeat client work, we get a feel for what clients like and what they also define as social value. So the engagement with the client is definitely something that one of the first things that we definitely do as well.
Yeah, and Ethan, getting it right, getting those ideas right in the first place is crucial, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. I think my perspective's slightly different. I agree. It always comes down to looking at the data that we need. We always need to take into account the indices of multiple deprivation. I think one of the most important thing is when I work with clients on delivering social value, we always want to make sure that as many different stakeholder perspectives are taken into account as possible. So whether that means going out and surveying or taking a more general approach in terms of localized data sets entirely depends on the parameters of the project. I'd say as a general point within any economic valuation or appraisal, we'll obviously want to take into account the levels of deprivation within that localized area. So that's always going to be a fantastic starting point for any organization looking to deliver some genuine impact in areas where communities may be deprived, especially where there are time or resource constraints, which might mean we can't take in as many views as we would like to. So I think by starting out by using those large, robust data sets that help us identify the overarching needs of the community, it's always going to be a fantastic starting point. And then after that, it'll always come down to the time and resources available to try and speak to as many different stakeholders as we can to get that clear picture of the projected impacts that some of these initiatives might have.
Yeah, I think it's what Danielle said. Definitely, it all starts at the tender stage, getting that early planning and the early consultation with all the relevant people, because you can truly understand a place when you have them conversations early doors.
Absolutely, and we'll go on to kind of some of the pitfalls that do occur because I'm sure all projects these days have the best intentions when it comes to social value strategies and delivering the best social value for the area in which they are based. But where do well-intentioned social value strategies most often fall down once a project gets to that go live stage? We'll go with you first on this one, Hayley. But yeah, good to hear from all of you on it.
Previously touched just on then about the lack of early engagement with stakeholders. Anyone that you want to work with, definitely getting them involved early doors. Another thing as well, quite often poor integration with the project team. It's definitely it's a social value strategy sort of from a office-based role or a procurement role. Quite often you can put strategies in place. If that is not fed properly into the project team, then again, it's then seen as that sort of add-on and it does fall down. And you're 6 months in and the next thing you know, the client's asking about social value output. So for me, definitely poor integration with the project team can certainly affect a sort of social value strategy falling down. So it's important to make sure that everybody's on board from the get-go. And then from tendering to pre-con to contract, SV remains that sort of golden thread throughout.
And Danielle, does that tally with your experiences with VINCI?
Yeah, so a few of the same things that I've experienced over the years. A really bad tender question where it's not fulfilling the needs of what the local area needs. So someone hasn't done the research before they've started the procurement exercise. No client engagement. So a client asks the question, but then they don't want to be involved. That sort of makes it fall down as well. And we've also engaged in communities and they've not had the resource to engage back with us. So like local schools and community groups, they've just been too busy to allow us to come in and support the students. So that's been one barrier that I've come across, and I was just that sort of stunned me. I was a bit like, well, what do we do now? And then we worked then with the local authorities to try and get the schools the resources they needed to accept this social value programme. But yeah, maturity of the business and the projects and the supply chain and social value also helps with the delivery. If everyone isn't on board, don't understand what social value is, and isn't on board with the project social value plan and brought into it, that can also make it fall down.
Yeah, it's the visibility, isn't it, that definitely helps. And if that's quite limited from the outset, sort of tying in with what Ethan does, especially then with the monitoring, reporting, it's making that visible. And by having that, it definitely helps keep your strategy strong.
Yeah, we'll bring Ethan in on that one there. You see it from a slightly different and slightly more neutral lens, Ethan. Where do you see these social value strategies often falling down?
I think I'd agree with Hayley and Danielle on a lot of the stuff they've just mentioned. It's always going to be, and I'll keep banging on about this, we need to involve the stakeholders as many opportunities as we can in capturing all that nuanced data. I think most organizations, they clearly want to deliver some form of positive impact. We know that most impacts will have a negative as well as a positive. So these projects or interventions, there's going to be a wide range of outcomes which we need to account for in terms of true social value accounting. And that's not ignoring the fact that most of these interventions will generate some form of negative impact too. I think often these data capture processes, they're not well aligned within organizations. They tend to be put further down the list or sometimes ad hoc at times. I think if we can make social value strategy a central focus within an intervention, that's more aligned to formal data capture. So, for example, within HR processes or financial accounting, I think then that ability to input this into centralized systems, such as Loop or any social value software, that becomes a much smoother process where evidence can be checked and verified across the business.
Yeah, it seems like getting those local priorities right is absolutely essential to ensuring that social value strategies work out. And we've actually got our second audience poll question, if we could fire that up now, because it'd be good to hear from our audience as to how clearly local priorities are defined in the projects that they're working on. So are they very clearly defined and shaped with local insight? Is it somewhat clearly, so informed but not consistent? Is it not very clearly, so mostly driven by national requirements, or not at all? Social value is largely generic. So we'll just give another 10 seconds or so on that, to give you 30 seconds in total to respond. So how clearly are local priorities defined on the projects that you work on? Is it very clearly, somewhat clearly, not very clearly, or not at all? So the poll's just wrapped up there, and it's sort of a middling picture there, really. There's a level of somewhat clearly, but also 42%, the largest amount of our respondents today, said not very clearly, and they are mostly driven by national requirements, which it's almost like we'd thought about this before we went and built our next questioning, because that is around that balance between deciding where social value needs to be consistent across all projects and where it needs to be locally bespoke. So we'll go to you first on this, Ethan. Where do you see the decisions being made on that?
I think in terms of social value strategy, so for any organization or within an intervention, there has to be consistent themes or a template in relation to some of the metrics or KPIs which we're looking to measure. I think in terms of actual impacts, we obviously want to take into account the fact that there's going to be a range of different stakeholders depending on which regions we're targeting. So we always want to take in as many different characteristic details or socioeconomic backgrounds for affected stakeholders as possible in order to make that monetization process as accurate as possible. I'd say broad strokes or generalizations are absolutely fine at the forecasting stage. But further down that line that we go, or further down that initiative or project that we go, ideally we want to have more accurate data come into the system in terms of the stakeholders. So that could be from the range of employment histories or age or ethnicity, if we're talking about jobs being created. From a purely economic perspective, we know the value of money and we know how it differs for different people. And we can clearly monetize those impacts given we have marginal utility curves for large data sets across the UK. So there's some really interesting stuff that we can do in terms of monetization within social value. And if we have different details for different stakeholders, we can give different, more clearly defined values. That being said, obviously within any monetization process, we're trying to calculate a wide range of different impacts. So there's always going to be an element of caution. I'd say in the grand scheme of trying to create positive value for those who need it most within specific context, it's a really powerful tool in terms of stakeholder communication.
Yeah. Danielle, how is it that you guys kind of square this circle and decide where the balance lay between the kind of the consistency across projects and making sure that what you're delivering locally is what is needed by those in the area of the project?
Yes, so 10 years ago we decided to create a set of KPIs. So our social value strategy has a set of KPIs created through looking at local needs, because local needs is all the same, but it's just higher or lower in different areas. So we need to create a strategy that is aligned to local needs. So our KPIs are like education, apprentices, employment and skills, and stuff like that. So that is our key strategy for our business. We decided 10 years ago, every single project that we deliver is going to deliver social value against these KPIs and these targets. But because they're headline KPIs, they can be adaptable to the local needs. So we're saying as a business, we want to deliver education activities, and whatever them education activities need to be for that local community, it still falls into the brackets. We're capturing all the metrics that we need to still report against that at whoever we're engaging with. So like people we're engaging with, feedback, number of hours were spent, what the activity actually is. We're capturing all of that for all our activities. But if you don't have that strategy in place, you could be going into every project, every community, reinventing the wheel. And that doesn't help you mature as a business, because you never mature because you're still chasing your tail. So to have that good strategy set in the first place and then deliver that strategy to the local community in line with local needs is good.
Yeah, and Hayley, I'm curious as to whether the balance is maybe slightly different with you as a regional contractor and being naturally a little closer to the communities in which you're working.
Absolutely. So in terms of like a consistent sort of SV approach, as a business, we have things, it's like so many other businesses, fair recruitment practices, an apprenticeship scheme, local labour targets, our environmental targets with our carbon reduction plan and general environmental targets, a governance process. So as a company, we have our sort of core consistent SV elements, which are then applied through projects, trying to get apprenticeship weeks and our apprentices involved in a different range of schemes as much as we can, and also our subcontractors as well. And then we also have our project bespoke SV elements. So again, as a company, we do education events and help inspire the youth. And then again, we take that approach and sort of like what Danielle said, it's then applying that, what we do as a group, to actually working with a client to be more locally focused. So again, that's partnerships with schools and local charities. So again, it's sort of twofold, that we have the consistent SV is us as a business, and then we have the locally bespoke SV, and particularly being a regional contractor, it certainly helps with a lot of the repeat workload as well, that we do have them relationships with the local charities, and we're sort of in touch with them across the board on a whole range of things. So it's not just there for a project and back out again. We do invest in the sort of communities where we operate, both project level and also sort of from our regional offices.
Excellent stuff. We're going to move on now, and we'll stick with you actually on this one, Hayley, because we always talk a lot about the balancing act around social value and the challenges that all projects face, particularly those in the public sector. How do you
Mm.
balance social value with those other project pressures, around cost and time without it ending up being sidelined?
Yeah, well, it's from the outset, so it's in line with program and budget. So if we receive a tender and say we're asked about social value, which say most public sector bids are with the sort of Procurement Act and the requirements, you know, we work alongside the estimating team. And we also work with the contracts manager, and then we also work with divisional heads to ensure that balancing social value is in line with the cost and the pressures of, if it's a tight program, site visits might not actually be something that we can offer. If the site actually is a roofing project, that might, we wouldn't get students up on the roof. So again, we would work with sort of what does the project entail, and what actually can we offer? What is the project open to? Say if the time pressure, if it's right, it's a late procurement, we've got a couple of weeks to get onto site. It might be then actually we do things more so in the community rather than getting people onto the site. So again, them conversations are all happening early doors, and then say integrated in the project throughout, and also anything that can be a lower cost intervention as well. I think people can sort of sometimes see SV as like you need thousands and thousands of pounds to just give to a charity. And actually, that's not the case. Anything you can do that has like a lower cost intervention with a high output are quite often the most impactful. You don't just have to put thousands of pounds away into a budget. Actually, when you understand them local stakeholders, you can really redefine your sort of interventions and make them local and bespoke, and not having to, cost the earth.
Yeah, we'll get onto some of those smaller interventions in a moment with Danielle. But we'll stay on this question with you for now, Danielle, in terms of whether VINCI manages to strike that balance. How do you manage to do it without the social value ending up being sidelined?
So I think it's all about good planning. So we plan social value against the project program. So the social value program sits with the project program, maximising the pre-construction period to plan and deliver what we can in that stage. Missing key milestones. So on our program, we'll have key milestones. We're going to top out. Groundworks are going to be finished. Making sure we're not planning anything in that deadline. And also, you've got the whole project team brought in. You've got our project team brought in. We've got our supply chain on board. So the load is spread, and it's not just down to the contract management team. Everyone's involved and plan it out. So good planning leads to successful delivery.
Yeah, and we'll go on to the point that Hayley sort of just mentioned around on those sort of larger long-term projects. How do you manage to square the circle, Danielle, in making sure that those maybe slightly smaller social value actions feel intentional rather than sort of ad hoc or tick box?
I think it's about gathering the impact and the data and speaking to the people who you've delivered interventions for and finding out what that impact has had on their life or that community. So because it could be that community or that charity just needs this one intervention, and it might only be small, and that's fine because that's what they need to either expand or keep delivering the services to the local community. So I think smaller ad hoc activities, there's nothing wrong with it. It's what that community needs, and that's what we should be focused on. Bigger, larger screens are great. They affect more people and just as valuable.
Brilliant stuff. We'll move on to the next audience poll just to get into the next section of questions. I appreciate time is ticking on. So does your organization currently use a digital solution to measure social value? So does your organization currently use a digital solution to help measure social value? So we've got the options of yes, successfully, yes, but we're facing challenges with it. Hopefully Ethan's not going to be asking any tech support questions about Loop on this webinar. No, but we're interested in using one, or no, we don't want to. So there's your 4 options there. Yes, successfully. Yes, but we're facing challenges. No, but we're interested in using one, or no, we don't want to. So interestingly, and potentially an opportunity here for Ethan to talk a little bit more about how useful Loop can be in this situation. But we've got 56%, sorry, saying that no, but we'd be interested in using one. So looking at that, that's quick maths. 66% of attendees say they currently do not use any kind of digital solution for measuring social value. Quite an interestingly high number there, not bothering with any digital solutions. So we'll go to Ethan first on this as the sort of the Loop expert. What role does better local data and insight play in shaping more inclusive engagement with communities, Ethan?
I think the poll question was really interesting, actually. I think it always comes down to the more accurate and up-to-date data that we can tailor into our interventions. So if we're looking at the local needs of the communities, if we can implement that robust data into a tool and simplify that process for the user in terms of going into Loop, looking at the local needs and pulling out some specific interventions, that's always going to be such a powerful tool. And I think that's where the updated indices of multiple deprivation comes into play. So we're obviously looking at the relative deprivation from a range of different indexes, and that's used as the official measure for deprivation in England. So with that data, we can incorporate that into a local needs type of tool, which we do within Loop. So we can give organisations the ability to select metrics or interventions within a community that will benefit areas where deprivation is flagged as high within the system. So I'd say when the government gives us this fantastic bank of data, we're able to incorporate that effectively and seamlessly into a social value strategy within the tool, which in essence is a great time saver and gives us that those overarching themes that we need to focus on.
Yeah, and Danielle, as you mentioned early on, as did Haley, having that high quality local data makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And not just local data as well, but I think data from when we've worked in an area before on delivery really helps as well. Because we take a lot of learning from that, what worked, what didn't work, and what's our supply chain look like in that area, and it helps us refine our offer to something that we can actually deliver, as well as it being aligned to local needs.
Yeah, and Haley, is that the same perspective from yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, having that repeat client work, definitely you get to understand that client, and like I say, you have your strategy and knowing what worked well and maybe not what didn't quite plan out what you thought. It definitely helps then going forward. So yeah, and also just having that local insights. So yes, we talk about data, but also just having that genuine communication with people as well really does help in having that local insight and making them genuine connections, because again, to make it feel tick box, it's like, oh, we're here, let's do this, and now we're gone. Actually keeping them relationships, and once you've got that insight, say if you've been to a school and then you've delivered a session, and actually it's keeping in touch with that school. What did they think of the session? Did anything come from that? And then having that genuine engagement particularly helps with sort of shaping that engagement.
Excellent. Well, just a reminder that the Q&A session will happen at the end of today's webinar, so you'll have around 10 minutes at the end to ask any of your questions as the audience. If you could make sure you're submitting those now using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, we can make sure that we get those to our panel, particularly any about these digital solutions that 66% of those in the audience aren't currently using, and be interested to see what some of the barriers that you maybe feel are to using those types of solutions. we'll just move on to a further question on the technology side, and we'll pose this to you, Ethan. How has technology changed the conversation around social value? Where is technology really adding the value into social value?
I think in terms of access to that real-time data and resources, as well as the tools that can quickly implement the developing nature of social value. In terms of monetization, there can be rapid processes of change. I think it's been really useful, not just for clients, but also for the validity of the proxy values used within the space. It's a really fantastic point to be able to check these proxies from a range of different social value organizations. I think for too long we've had monetization processes within social value where they've been stuck in generalized multipliers used for a broad range of stakeholders to represent different outcomes. I think clearly we know this isn't the case and that everyone experiences change quite differently. But what has been useful with the work that I do is that the government is taking more of an active role in defining what social value is and how to monetize that appropriately. So from my perspective, that means focusing on social cost benefit analysis and utilizing the latest data available. We touched on the IMD, but there's also a fantastic bank of ONS data. There's also surveying stakeholders. There's a range of different things which we can go into. All of that is continually revised. I'd say that bank of freely available data can easily be incorporated into any social value strategy, given the capabilities of technology that we have today and the platforms that we have to incorporate that latest thinking.
Excellent. And Danielle, do you want to jump in on that one as well?
Yeah, so just I know Ethan's talking like from a social value platform point of view, but I just wanted to talk about from when we started 10 years ago, how technology has changed. We started with Excel spreadsheets and printouts of labour inductions, and we used to put postcodes into spreadsheets. We could be going through 500 pages of induction sheets. But new technologies like the MSite integration system and all our data systems, we now can pull all that data. It just saves so much time. The technology has just reduced the amount of time collecting data within social value. So if you're not using technology, you please use it for your data sets that you can collect automatically.
Yeah, like I say, people think SV is in technology in terms of reporting onto a platform, which it is, but like I say, actually it's your internal processes and how you use technology internally to actually get that data to put onto the platform. So yeah, the signing in apps like you, Danielle, they definitely they've made us more efficient for sure. Yeah.
Filing cabinets full of spreadsheets are thankfully no longer in site offices. One might say.
Not good for the carbon footprint.
Excellent stuff. Well, we've got another couple of questions for our panel coming up, but we'll just open up our penultimate audience poll, which was talking about delivering more effective social value and what would help you deliver more effective place-based social value. Multiple choice, and you've got options of a better insight into local needs, stronger collaboration across projects, more time and resource on delivery, and improved tools to track and evidence impact. And if there's something that you feel would help you deliver more effective social value that's not mentioned on the list, please feel free to pop it in the Q&A box, and we can discuss it as an option in the Q&A section. Just leave that running for another few moments because people are still responding to it. Yeah, and if we could close that poll now, please. And a very even split across that. I don't think I've ever seen a more even split across a poll on Pagabo Live. But around just over 50% are saying that they feel like they need better insight into local needs, and we can ask a little bit more of our panel on that later on. But 33% saying stronger collaboration across projects, 36% saying more time and resource on delivery, and the resource challenge I know is something that is common across the entire industry, and also improved tools to track and evidence impact was 41%, our second highest number of respondents. So a fairly significant number of our audience are still looking for those better insights into local needs. We'll move on to our last couple of pre-planned questions. We'll go to all of you on this one because it'd be good to hear examples of projects that you've been involved in that best demonstrate that best practice in place-based social values. So we'll go to you first in this one, Hayley, but as I say, I'd like to hear from all of our panel on this one.
Yeah, so a couple of examples to sort of demonstrate best practice with place is certainly over the past few years, we are definitely aligning the use of social enterprises into our procurement. So linking in with a lot of social enterprises, they naturally are not-for-profit companies who deliver a lot of good things in local communities. So for us, by supporting them and integrating them into our supply chain, it adds that value naturally. So for example, when we've been doing work in Nottingham, there's a social enterprise there called Radiant Cleaners, and they do site cabin cleaning work, for example, and they, as an organisation, are fantastic in what they do. They pay the real living wage. It's those who have barriers to work, whether it be an ex-offender, mental health problems, and they offer opportunities to support them into work. And if our sites can help them keep employment, and actually also if we work with them and we add more sites to their workload, it means they can then also then employ more local people. So definitely that is one way of integrating with local people more so in the supply chain rather than also just being like with local generally like subcontractors. And also as well integrating with the local education establishments. So for example, where we work, if we can, we link in with the local colleges and they fully understand barriers to employment and some of the skill sets that actually young local people might be lacking in or need more support on. And again, we can then tailor our offering to what the students actually need and how we can actually help and support them into work.
Excellent stuff. Good to hear a Radiant Cleaners shout out on Pagabo Live,
Absolutely.
a great social enterprise in my adopted hometown of Nottingham. Danielle, good to hear an example from you guys of demonstrating best practice in social value.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about something that we created a few years ago, which was a community skills centre. Sort of bringing our social value offer to our projects so the people closest to our projects can benefit and are not having to travel further to receive training. So it was the Community Skills Centre that we created about 2-3 years ago now, if I remember. So it's an on-site training centre. I know a lot of training providers provide construction training in various areas, but we were working in Blackpool and the closest training centre was in Preston. So we decided to bring the training centre and put it on site and delivered a number of training interventions and trade training. So not only trying to close the skills gap, but providing that local base for local people to get on board. It worked really well. We had the platform just across a road from the site, which is a young person into employment support services run by Blackpool Council. And it worked really well. And not just the locality, the young people looking for work, seeing the actual construction site progress. They had so much more buy-in to wanting to get into the construction industry. And there was just loads of benefits to it, working with local authorities, local partners, local training providers. So yeah, really good local offer.
Excellent stuff. And to wrap up on that question, we'll go to you, Ethan. You obviously with your Loop hat on, will have experienced a lot of these types of projects. What's some of the best practice that you've seen?
I think from my perspective, I'm less boots on the ground. So I would say in terms of the methodological sense, it's always going to be best practice that is going to follow a rigorous approach to monetization. Generally speaking, we've seen large numbers being thrown about within the social value space, which is what we try to do at Loop is we try to take a really conservative approach to monetization in general. So that means the methodology that we use that sits behind all the metrics and KPIs that we deliver, we use a cost benefit analysis as opposed to an SROI analysis. So inherently, that's going to be a lot more conservative than any other social value framework, which isn't using SCBA. So I'd always advise clients, regardless of whichever platform or whatever framework they're working with, to ask questions around how these impacts are monetized. If proxy values are the same for different stakeholders or interventions, then we need to ask the question why that is. I think the government gives us these fantastic tools, especially the Green Book, that can be used for appraisal within social value. That gives us access to a framework that allows us to differentiate between stakeholders. So taking into account the marginal utility of income, which means we can differentiate impacts and therefore those monetary values between different groups of stakeholders. I think we should question where frameworks offer absurdly large values just for spending a lot of money within their supply chain, for an example. I think in an ideal world, we obviously want to understand the impact that money has. So is that money that you're spending within the supply chain, is that generating more jobs or investment, or is it going into the pockets of shareholders? And there's no clear impacts that we can monetize. I think the more organizations that can question where some of these values come from, and the better our understanding from asking these questions, the better the long-term and transparent nature of social value there will be. And that needs to stand up to scrutiny, essentially.
Excellent response. And just to wrap up, before we go into our audience questions, it would be good to hear a bit of future-looking content from all of you guys in terms of looking ahead and what good place-based social value will look like in 5 years' time if we can get it right now. We'll go to you first on this one, Danielle. What do you think it would? What are we seeing for 5 years in the future of social value, and how can we make sure we get it right?
So, first one, improve procurement processes. Someone doing that local needs research and providing us with that before we even come out to tender. Engagement from clients and local authorities, and everyone being part of that process of creating that strategy once we go into contract. So everyone is on the same page, everyone is working to the same goals. And more engagement with the community and their voices to inform that plan as well. So we know what we are delivering is in line with what they want and in line with local needs. Yeah, I think just getting the foundations right helps effective social value delivery and continuous improvements as well. Just continue improving what we're delivering.
Yeah, Hayley, I can see you nodding away there at that.
Yeah,
your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think particularly getting social value right is definitely picking up with what Danielle said, is that ensuring that SV is also delivered as a core from a client procurement team to the client PM team to then us as a contractor. Because again, I think people have different variations of what social value is and what it means. So I think to get it right, it's having what is SV to you as a client, to you as a community, and having that joined up approach. Because once you're all on the same page with that, your impact will be much better and much larger. And I think as well, it's just having genuine co-created with the community social value action plans, and actually what are the community asking for. It could be small scale, it could be on a larger scale. The impact is what they feel, and I think having that genuine interaction with the community definitely helps and supports social value action plans, and also gets the buy-in as well.
Thank you very much, Hayley. And Ethan, same question to you. What would good place-based social value look like in 5 years' time if we can get it right now?
I think there is coming a point within government that social value will be more clearly defined by what the government expects. And I think that's a good thing, because I'm sure we're all aware that there's far too many different ways to monetize social value impact, and how frustrating that can be when we're trying to explain the differences in approach or the difference in numbers, when essentially all we're trying to do is do something good when we're adopting a social value strategy. So I think many organizations in the space will probably unknowingly follow a monetization process that isn't formally aligned to what the government would recognize as a formal appraisal. And that's not the fault of the industry. It's just that there's too many blurred lines in how we approach monetization. I think where we're at today is that it leads to confusion because there's so many different frameworks. There's numbers that are just thrown out there, and it isn't helping the adoption in terms of social value in the long term. So I'd say from my perspective, in 5 years' time, I'd like the social value space, especially if we're using monetization techniques to follow best practice set out by government more formally. And given that it's the most conservative approach that we can follow. And I think what comes with that is the inherent understanding that if we're following cost benefit analysis as opposed to SROI, we're probably undercounting rather than overcounting, but I'd much rather be in that undercounting space than overcounting and double counting impacts, because that's where social value monetization really falls down and it really hurts social value in the long term. So we've currently got the Green Book review, which is currently underway. So we should have an update on the Green Book in about 6 months' time. So there'll be revisions to social discounting rates. There'll be revisions to how well-being is implemented within the appraisal process. So it's a really interesting time, especially in the next year, that we'll be able to adopt these more formally recognised approaches within government, and numbers should start to be more consistent across frameworks.
Yeah, to borrow a phrase, make social value valuable again. This is where our panel get their answers marked basically in the exam. We're going to open up our final audience poll, which is to revisit the knowledge test that we did earlier on. So after today's session, how confident are you in designing and delivering place-based social value on your projects? And not to forget, we also have a bit of a Q&A session after that. So if there are any gaps that you'd like to have covered, please drop a question in. We have had a few in already, so it'd be great to get through as many of those as we can before the end of today's session. Just give another few seconds for everyone to respond. And if we could close that now, please. So the good news is that more than 80% of people that have responded to the poll have said that they are confident or very confident in delivering place-based social value on their projects based on the responses from today's webinar. So well done to our panel thus far. We'll be making sure that we continue to build our audience's knowledge around social value. There's also a poll that should be popping up on your screen now if you'd like to hear more from the Pagabo team about how to successfully embed place-based social value in any of your upcoming projects. But what we'll do for now is we will move on to our audience Q&A with our panel. We've had a one come in from Pagabo Live regular Peter Masonbrook. Hello, Peter. We'll put this to you, Ethan, for now, but feel free to jump in if you have any input, Hayley and Danielle. How can we use digital tools not just to tell about tell about successful outcomes, not just commitments, and also the long-lasting impact? We'll go to you on this one, Ethan.
Yeah, I think that's where the tool implementation comes in. So with our local needs analysis tool that's coming into the Loop system within the next few months, we'll be able to look at specific interventions or KPIs that perhaps a community needs. We'll be able to show the impact that if you're delivering those interventions that can have on different types of stakeholders, depending on the information that you can tell us. So yeah, there's a range of different ways that you can do that within a tool. It doesn't have to be to commitments. It can be, a social value organization's policy. It can be an intervention. It can be anything that you can input into the system. We can look at loads of different KPIs and we can monetize that. And those impacts can have a broad range of consequences over a different duration.
And just to go back to one of the stats that jumped out at me from our audience polls as well, Ethan, 66% of those who responded saying they don't use any digital solutions at all for social value. Was that a number, was that surprisingly high for you? Because it felt very high to me.
Yeah, I think that did surprise me quite a lot. But then again, there are so many different social value platforms in the space, it can often be quite confusing. So I completely get it. There's, sometimes there can be a bit of a blurred line between which one to choose, or I don't know which monetization process to go down, or different KPIs that I need to hit. So completely understandable, but hopefully that's something that we can address.
Yeah. We're going to go to a question that's coming from an anonymous attendee, and I think from just judging from when the time that this came in, it was when Haley and Danielle were talking about collecting local data. The question is, what data specifically are you measuring, and how are you collecting that data locally on your projects? Either Haley or Danielle, feel free to jump in on that one.
Where to start?
Yeah.
How long's a piece of string? We've only got 10 minutes left.
So we've got employment people data that will come through our M-Site terminal, which will ask previous employment, out to work, where they live, and all that personal data. So that informs our employment outputs, digital employment outputs, and tells that story around employability. We've also got a digital form where our people collect data. So if they've been out to a school, they've done an activity, we have a digital form. They put what the activity was, how many people from our side went, how many from supply chain went, how many students were engaged with, and what the feedback was from them students. They close that form, that pulls that data into Power BI for us, and then we can look at our impact numbers, our volunteering hours and stuff like that. Haley, do you want to pick up any other data? Because I can't think.
Yeah, very similar. So again, we have a range of tools from the Insight data apps to dare I say an old-fashioned spreadsheet. So we have a range of data that we collect on full-time employment, whether it be through Lindum, or should we be using perhaps a recruitment agency to help fulfill maybe on some short-term roles. We also look at waste generated, recycled. We have the full audit process for our waste, so we know exactly what is going and where, what's recycled, what actually happens, the story with that waste. School visits, school hours to prepare visits, charity contributions, volunteering, ways to promote employment, supporting needs. It's the list is almost endless, but again, depending on the project, if the client has said to us, in this area, there's actually a lot of, ex-offenders that we'd like to support. We have a program we really want to have some impact with, then we will bring that in as a KPI almost. So again, there's things you can do generally across the board. But then, if a client is saying, we really need to tackle this, then we'll always then bring it into record. So again, there's that flexibility as well.
Yeah, so it's sort of quality and relevance of data as well.
And definitely going back to your strategy and your KPIs, and then map the data to your KPI. So this is KPI education. What do you want to measure, and what do you want the output to be? So it's mapping that data.
Yeah, and I think the tricky thing is in an organisation, it's that communication you have internally. We're a regional contractor with 600 staff, and again, it's having that system in place that people actually in your organisation are aware of what you class as social value, and then actually what information you want from them. So again, lots of people, lots of our site teams naturally do great things for our neighbours with volunteering and donations and things like that. And it's quite organic, but then it's having that system in place where actually them stories and information is fed back. So I think internally it's having that agreement of what you'd like to record and why, to then enable actually then what you record to then sort of naturally follow.
Excellent stuff. We've probably got time just to squeeze in a question around the Procurement Act. It was something that was mentioned earlier, and it was around this time last year that everyone was running around with their their hair on fire about it. This is for both for you, Danielle and Hayley. Are you, a year on from the announcements around the Procurement Act? Are you seeing any impact on the social value delivery on site related to the Procurement Act? Or if you aren't yet, what are you anticipating seeing? We'll go to you first on this one, Hayley.
For me, I think things haven't quite picked up at the speed of what I thought they would. I feel that government have set this strategy and local authority is still catching up. I think local authorities, from my experience, some are better than others. They're now asking social value questions probably in most tenders now because the law dictates them to. But then when you are successful on that project, we're still finding they're a bit, oh, what is that? What does it really mean? And we're almost still having to educate the client a little bit. So for me, it's the Procurement Act. It's there in principle. It's getting asked in tenders, and procurement teams want information from us. But I feel there's that middle ground from a sort of client PM perspective to link in with their procurement team is still missing a little bit. I don't know if that's your experience, Danielle, but that's something that we found.
Yeah, so we've had a few tenders come in with the new procurement model. We've had a few tenders with the old procurement model. Still talking about COVID-19, but the way I sort of look at it, if you are not a social value person and you look at the new social value model, I could imagine it would blow your mind a little bit.
Very overwhelming.
From a procurement person or a construction management person, someone who's delivering on site, it's a lot for people to digest and understand, I think. So I get that it's going to take a little bit of time. But yeah, if you're in the procurement and you talking to, say you've got a list of contractors, engage with them. I know we're not saying you're going to give them a job, but engage them and get some feedback on what can be delivered, because then that'll make the procurement process a little bit better. And every social value team wants that to be more refined and better so they can respond.
Potentially close that knowledge gap a little bit as
well.
Yeah, I think it's that knowledge sharing, isn't it, of SV and what does the Procurement Act really mean for a local authority or a local charity. I think there's that big of what it is, but what, like say, day to day, what is it? What does it look like? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much to all of our panelists today, to Danielle, to Hayley, and to Ethan. That is unfortunately all we've got time for today. Thank you everyone for tuning in as well. We've had I think we peaked out at around 140 in attendance today, which is really, really good, and obviously great to hear that so many people keen to get some more intel on social value and its delivery. Anyone that has joined today or signed up for today is now part of the Pagabo Live community, so you will receive a link to all of our upcoming sessions. There's also a newsletter that comes out around a week after each of our Pagabo Live sessions with a recording of the webinar in video and podcast form, so you can make sure that you're catching up or sharing it with your colleagues if they haven't had the opportunity to tune in today. If you've attended today, you'll also be able to claim a CPD credit for today's session. So you'll be receiving an email from the Pagabo team on how you can do that in the coming days. Our next Pagabo Live will be in February. We'll be looking at government housing targets and what the industry needs to do collectively to help everybody achieve those targets. So all remains to be said is thank you very much to everyone again for your attendance today, to Danielle, to Hayley, and to Ethan on our panel, and we hope to see you all again next time. Thank you very much.